When Johnny Carson invited an autistic boy on stage, his producers were screaming, "Move on," in his earpiece. But Johnny waited and waited, and after 3 minutes of silence, what the child finally said left 12 million viewers in tears. It was November 8, 1983, and The Tonight Show was taping its Tuesday night episode at NBC's Burbank studios. Johnny Carson was about to do something unprecedented that would either become the most powerful moment in television history or the most uncomfortable disaster ever broadcast to millions of homes across America. Sitting in the guest chair next to Johnny's desk was 10-year-old Michael Bennett, a boy with severe nonverbal autism who had never spoken in public in his entire life. Not at school, not at family gatherings, not even at his own birthday parties. Michael communicated through hand gestures and written notes with his mother, but verbal speech in the presence of anyone outside his immediate family was something he simply could not do. Yet here he was on national television about to be interviewed by the biggest talk show host in America. The story of how Michael ended up in that chair began 6 months earlier when his mother, Patricia Bennett, made a decision that everyone in her life told her was absolutely crazy. She decided to write to Johnny Carson and ask if her autistic son could appear on The Tonight Show. Patricia had been watching The Tonight Show religiously for years. She'd seen Johnny interview children before, child actors, young musicians, kids with extraordinary talents. But she'd never seen him interview a child like Michael, a child who the world considered broken, a child who doctors said would never lead a normal life, a child who couldn't even speak when people were watching him. But Patricia had noticed something special about Johnny Carson over the years. When he interviewed guests who were nervous or struggling, he didn't rush them. He didn't talk over them. He gave them space. He gave them time. And Patricia thought that maybe, just maybe, if someone gave Michael enough space and time, her son might surprise everyone. She wrote 53 heartfelt letters to The Tonight Show over the course of 5 months. 53 letters explaining Michael's autism, describing how he was brilliant and funny and kind when he was comfortable, but locked inside silence when he felt observed or pressured. 53 letters asking for just one chance to show America that autistic children were more than their diagnosis. The first 50 letters went unanswered, but the 53rd letter reached Johnny's personal assistant on a day when Johnny happened to be in the office sorting through unusual audience requests. The assistant showed Johnny the letter, expecting him to politely decline, as he had with so many similar requests. Instead, Johnny read the letter carefully, then read it again. Finally, he said something unexpected. "Get her on the phone immediately," when Patricia answered her home phone and heard, "This is Johnny Carson." She thought it was a cruel prank, but it was really him, and he had a question that would change everything. "Mrs. Bennett," Johnny said, "I'd like to invite your son, Michael, on the show, but I need you to be honest with me. If he can't speak when he gets here, if he just sits there in silence, are you going to be okay with that being on television? Because I don't want to do anything that would hurt him." Patricia's answer was immediate and heartfelt. "Mr. Carson, Michael has been silent his whole life. If he's silent on your show, that's just Michael being Michael. But if there's even a chance that your kindness might help him find his voice, then we absolutely have to try. Then we'll try," Johnny said with genuine warmth. "And Mrs. Bennett, no matter what happens, we'll make sure it's handled with complete respect." Now, 3 weeks later, here they were. Michael sat in the guest chair, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes fixed on the floor. He was wearing a suit that his mother had bought for the occasion, and his hair was carefully combed. He looked like any other young guest, except he hadn't made eye contact with anyone since arriving, and he hadn't said a single word. Johnny had prepared extensively for this important interview. He'd read books about autism. He'd spoken with specialists. He'd learned that sudden movements, loud noises, and direct questions could be overwhelming. He'd been told that Michael might not respond at all, and that the kindest thing would be to keep the segment brief and respectful. But when Johnny looked at this silent child sitting next to him, and then looked out at the studio audience who were watching with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort, he made a bold decision that defied all the expert advice he received. He decided to give Michael time, real time, Not television time, where every second matters and dead air is death, but human time. The kind of time it takes for someone to feel safe enough to try something truly terrifying. Michael, Johnny said gently, I'm really glad you're here tonight. Your mom told me you like to build things with Lego. Is that true? Silence. Michael's eyes stayed on the floor. The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. Fred Dordova's voice crackled urgently in Johnny's earpiece. Johnny, move on. This isn't working. Johnny touched his earpiece and said barely audibly, no, not yet. He turned back to Michael and smiled warmly. You know, I wasn't very good at building things when I was your age. I tried to build a treehouse once and it fell apart the first time I climbed into it. Has that ever happened to you? Silence. 30 seconds passed. To the television audience, it felt like forever. To Michael's mother, sitting in the front row with tears already streaming, it felt like watching her son trapped behind glass. Move on, Johnny. Fred's voice was getting more insistent and urgent. We're losing the audience. And this segment now. But Johnny wasn't losing the audience. Something remarkable was happening in that studio. The initial discomfort was transforming into something else. People were leaning forward. The nervous laughter had stopped. Everyone was waiting, genuinely waiting to see if this child would speak. Johnny kept talking, his voice low and steady and patient, asking simple questions, not rushing, not pressuring. Do you have a favorite color, Michael? Mine is blue. What about you? 1 minute of silence, then 2. The cameramen were getting nervous, not knowing where to point their cameras during this unprecedented moment. The band members sat frozen, unsure if they should play Michael off stage. Ed McMahon watched from his seat with profound respect for what Johnny was attempting. We need to cut to commercial, Fred was nearly shouting. Now, we've been sitting here for 3 minutes. Johnny pulled out his earpiece again and set it on his desk. In doing so, he sent a clear and unmistakable message to his entire production crew. We're not moving on. We're giving this child the time he needs right now. The 3-minute mark approached. Michael hadn't moved, hadn't looked up, hadn't made a sound. Most television hosts would have moved on by now, thanked the child for coming, and called it an admirable but unsuccessful attempt. But Johnny Carson wasn't most television hosts, and he refused to give up on Michael. Michael, Johnny said, and there was something different in his voice now. Not performance, not interview technique, but genuine human connection. I know this is really scary. Being on TV is scary for a lot of people. Heck, I've been doing this for 20 years, and sometimes I still get nervous. But you know what? There's nobody here who wants anything from you except to get to know you a little bit better. That's all. Just get to know you. And then Johnny did something that would become absolutely legendary in television history. He stood up from his desk, walked over to Michael's chair, and sat down on the floor next to it. He just sat there on the studio floor in his suit at eye level with a 10-year-old boy. Who wouldn't look at him? The audience gasped. This was not something television hosts did. You stayed behind your desk. You maintained the professional distance. You didn't sit on the floor in front of 12 million viewers. But Johnny Carson did. It's okay if you don't want to talk, Michael, Johnny said softly. We can just sit here. That's fine, too. And they sat. Johnny on the floor, Michael in the chair, the studio in absolute silence. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15, and then Michael lifted his head. For the first time since arriving at the studio, Michael looked at Johnny Carson. Their eyes met, and in that moment of connection, something inside Michael shifted. His mouth opened slightly, his hands unclenched, and in a voice so quiet that the microphones almost didn't pick it up, Michael spoke his first public words in 10 years. Blue, he whispered. My favorite color is blue, too. The studio erupted, not with the usual applause and laughter, but with something deeper, a collective gasp of joy and relief and wonder. Patricia Bennett covered her mouth with both hands, sobbing openly. The cameramen, who'd been filming this entire extraordinary moment, had tears running down their faces. Johnny's own eyes were wet. He smiled up at Michael and said, Blue is a great color, isn't it? Yes, Michael said, and his voice was a little stronger now. It's the color of calm. Those 5 words. It's the color of calm. became one of the most quoted phrases in Tonight Show history because they weren't just words from a child. They were a window into how an autistic mind experienced the world, articulated beautifully by a 10-year-old who everyone had assumed couldn't communicate. Johnny spent the next 10 minutes sitting on that floor asking simple questions, giving Michael all the time he needed to answer. Michael spoke about his Lego creations. He described the model of the Golden Gate Bridge he built. He explained how patterns made him feel safe, and with every word, he became more confident, more present, more himself. When the segment finally ended, Johnny stood up from the floor and helped Michael out of his chair. Then he did something else unprecedented. He hugged the boy, not a brief professional TV hug, but a genuine embrace that said, "I see you and you are remarkable." The response to Michael's appearance was overwhelming. NBC received over 40,000 letters in the following week. Parents of autistic children wrote to say they'd never seen their child's experience represented on television with such dignity. Medical professionals wrote to say the segment had taught them something about patience and presuming competence. Schools across America began showing the tape in teacher training programs, but the impact went far beyond letters and training videos. Michael's appearance sparked a national conversation about autism that had never happened before. In 1983, most Americans had never heard the word autism. Those who had thought it meant someone who couldn't think, couldn't feel, couldn't connect. Michael's 3 minutes of silence, followed by his clear, beautiful words, challenged every assumption. Johnny used his platform to advocate for autism research and education. He donated to organizations supporting autistic children and their families. He invited autism specialists on the show to educate his audience about what autism actually was. Not a tragedy or a loss, but a different way of experiencing the world. Patricia Bennett received calls from other parents who'd been told their children would never speak, never learn, never have meaningful lives. Michael's moment had given them something precious. Hope and proof that with patience and respect, unexpected breakthroughs were possible. Michael himself continued to grow and develop. He never became what doctors would call typical, but he found his voice both literally and figuratively. He graduated from high school, went to college, and became a computer programmer. Years later, he would say that the night he spoke on The Tonight Show was the night he learned that his difference wasn't a deficiency. Johnny Carson kept a photo from that night in his office for the rest of his career. It showed him sitting on the floor next to Michael's chair, both of them looking at each other, captured in that moment just before Michael spoke. Beneath it was a quote from the child. "It's the color of calm." When Johnny died in 2005, Michael attended his funeral. He was asked to say a few words, and though public speaking was still difficult, he stood before the gathered mourners and said something that everyone present remembered. "Johnny Carson taught me that silence isn't empty. He taught me that waiting for someone isn't wasting time. He taught me that every person deserves the space to be themselves, even if being themselves takes 3 minutes of quiet on live television. He gave me time when the whole world wanted him to move on, and that gift of time gave me my voice. Today, that 3-minute segment is used in psychology programs, special education training, and autism advocacy workshops around the world. It's considered a defining moment in how America understood and accepted neurological differences. The lesson isn't complicated. Johnny Carson showed millions of people that patience isn't just a virtue, it's a form of respect. That giving someone time to find their voice is more important than filling airtime. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all as you wait for someone else to find the courage to speak. 3 minutes of silence, 5 words. It's the color of calm and a lifetime of impact for Michael, for autism awareness, and for everyone who learned that the world needs to slow down and give people the time they need to be fully themselves.